All right. Well, welcome again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Summer Sampler Lunch and Learn, brought to you in part by South Sound Business Magazine. We are really excited to be able to bring this series of free kind of previews of our classes and our excellent instructors this summer. My name is Sarah Lynn Smith. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm a program development manager here in the Professional Development Center at UW Tacoma. That means that I have the pleasure of working with our wonderful instructors and as well as our students from the point of inquiry all the way through program completion. As I mentioned a moment ago, our manager for this program is actually Chris Sellers, and he is a wonderful, knowledgeable point of contact. So if any of you do want his contact information, I'm happy to help make that connection. If you are not familiar with us here in the Professional Development Center, we are what is called a self-supporting program, in that we specifically focus on delivering non-degree professional development programs, ranging from short webinars to full certificates and customized training. And we do this in a way that is kind of outside of the normal funding structures and systems within the University of Washington. So it's an opportunity for us to be a little bit creative, try out some other things, and fill a need that is not always addressed in the regular degree ecosystem within the university. So today's Lunch and Learn is going to run approximately an hour, and I'll turn it over to our featured speaker, Toni, here in just a moment. I have a few housekeeping items. As I mentioned, I believe when some of you were entering, your microphones will be muted by default throughout the entire session. Depending on how many folks we have and kind of how the Q&A is going, we may open up microphones later on, but that's going to be kind of up to Toni's discretion and how much time we have. Let's see. As I mentioned, we are recording the session to send it out and post on our website afterwards. And finally, we have turned on the auto transcript feature in Zoom for this session. If you would like to turn that off, if you find it distracting, then you are welcome to by clicking on the little closed caption icon in the bottom of your screen, and you'll see an option that says hide subtitle. So with that, I turn it over to Toni, who you can find teaching in currently just in our nonprofit management program. But once we relaunch our fundraising management program, she teaches in that as well. So Toni, the room is yours. Just give me a holler when you're ready to launch that poll, and if you need anything else.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah Lynn. How lovely to see so many familiar faces and new ones as well. Really excited. I want to get us started today just with a bit of a process. Sarah Lynn mentioned that we're going to hold questions if you can, hold questions until the end. Now, there are times that these urgent things come up that you just can't continue listening or being present unless you get a question answered. If that happens, raise your hand. Probably that won't be the case. This isn't brain surgery that we're talking about today. But if something happens, do raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll have time at the end. You could also enter your questions in chat, which Sarah Lynn will look for anything urgent there. Otherwise, we'll address questions hopefully the last 10 minutes or so. All right. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Delighted to see you all. And I want to tell you that the classes that I teach in the Professional Development Center, and it's been over the last, I'm going to say 10 years now that I've been teaching. So when the program actually first started, the Professional Development Center was first launching, is when I got started. And my courses are all encapsulated at the moment in the nonprofit management certificate program. In that program, I teach leadership. I teach performance measurement and fund development, the whole course that this is a whirlwind tour through. So please come, you'll see me reference some things in this presentation that will say, oh, you'll learn more about that if you attend the performance measurement course. So we'll weave all those things in. In my life outside of teaching, I'm an executive coach and an organizational effectiveness consultant. And so what does that mean? That means that I work with primarily individuals or executive teams and their boards of directors. My PhD focused on revisioning governance through a completely different paradigm. And so I'm deeply involved in how boards of directors could lead our nonprofit organizations more creatively, more generatively, more strategically. So that's what I do besides teaching. And I actually love the classroom experience and have deep, long-standing relationships with many of my students. So I'm glad to be here and be able to share what's going on today in fund development. So let's jump in and talk about what to expect. It's not really a full hour, but in our time together, let's put it that way. Here's what we're going to look at. It's really this presentation is kind of a whirlwind tour through a 6-week course that's offered through the nonprofit certificate program called Fund Development. So I took sort of the best snippets from that to tease you with. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, we can't understand fund development if we don't have a little bit of an understanding of the other side of the coin, which is philanthropy. So we're going to look at that briefly. We're going to appreciate the value of working from a fund development plan. And why a fund development plan instead of just asking all your friends and family for money when you're working in a nonprofit. We're going to understand the elements of a balanced fund development plan, which you'll learn what that means in a bit. And then we're going to look at, as I do everything, look through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in this field. So we'll land for a moment on that just to plant some seeds for you. All right. So getting grounded, as I mentioned, fund development and philanthropy are two sides of the same coin. Now, I have a great fun YouTube that I share in the sometimes in the full course fund development course of this reporter on the street that goes out and starts asking people on the sidewalk what philanthropy is. And it's so funny. The answers they range from I think it's the study of insects to the history of the human race. The word is not commonly used, but it's been around for a long time. The Oxford English Dictionary just calls it the desire to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by generous donation of money to good causes. Leaves us with lots of questions, right? Like, whose good cause? And what's a generous donation? But we can think back and call on John D. Rockefeller, for example, who was one of the earliest to set up a foundation in the United States for his huge amount of wealth that he accumulated through Standard Oil. And this was in the late 1880s. And it was quite controversial setting up a foundation to give money away. Of course, the legislature was worried about that this was a scheme to hide funds and not pay taxes on them. So you can imagine this argument raged for a long time, but that's an example that everyone can draw on. Philanthropy could be you're walking down the street and someone there asks you for $10. But it doesn't fit the definition of philanthropy when we think about what our scholar Michael Worth said. He suggests that we think of philanthropy as a form of long-term investment in the infrastructure of society. So think about all the needs we have that go unmet, and all of the contributions that the social sector brings to that work. So I think of it as that. I think of it as the difference between responding to someone you see on the street that asks you for $10 as charity, and philanthropy is a structured approach to thinking about how to make a positive impact on the work of our so needed in our society. So then what's fund development? Some key words in here that I want to point out. So fund development is defined as the ongoing strategic positioning of an organization to sustain and grow its resources by building relationships with those who understand and care about the organization's relevance to the community. So a couple things here that this is a rich definition. Strategic positioning, I hope, brings up for you that it's not willy-nilly, although we know from practice that it often is in even relatively sophisticated nonprofit organizations. It can be less than strategically positioned, but also to sustain and grow its resources by building relationships. And we're going to see what the real value here of relationships. And also for those who understand and care about the organization's relevance to the community. So that means that if you take this to a very personal level, what is it that draws you to want to give an organization $100 or more? Think about that. You get aligned with the impact that you see the organization carrying out in your community. So fund development plans, if they're solid, are built on top of two main factors. We see that word relationships again, that continually strengthen connections between people and the mission of the organization. So these are inextricably linked. Those that we want to approach to support us, and what our relationship is with that organization. The other part of the sound fund development plan is a solid organizational structure and practices that enable the organization to carry out its mission effectively. So in other words, when we have organizations that understand the impact they are trying to make and how they can best achieve that, now we have a solid structure to create a fund development plan. Okay, so what's the intersection? Fundraising or fund development is not magic. It's not just for a few secret people that know how to go about it. It is very straightforward, and it's about relationship building. And those relationships that we're building in the fund development world are fueled by a shared vision of the impact we intend to make in our organization. This is so crucial, and hopefully it'll come clearer to you in a bit. What's the arena that we're talking about? Civil society, the social sector, or as many call it, the nonprofit sector. I prefer social sector. And what's happening in that sector? It's advancing private action for public good. What does that mean? Private action. the Black Lives Matter movement, um, uh, uh, this action to create equity, housing security, Tacoma Housing Authority, private action for public good, food security, emergency food network in the Tacoma region. These are examples of how we are advancing action for public good. Okay, so why bother with a fund development plan? Why aren't we, just as I've mentioned, asking our friends and family for money? This is how many nonprofits start, and I've helped a number of startup nonprofits. And what happens at the beginning? It is typically an investment. I mean, you've got an idea, you've got a theory of how you can make positive social change. And how do you get started? You go and ask your friends and family for money to get started. You have to have some resources to begin with, or perhaps you have the resources to invest. But that's not a sustainable approach. And so what do we have to do? We want to develop a balanced and reliable fund development, sustainable fund development plan. So why do that? A few reasons. One, it increases the visibility of the organization's work within the community it serves. You're getting the word out, if you will, letting your community that you serve see the work that's happening. What's another reason? To build awareness and understanding of the organization's intended impact. This is something that we talk about in the performance measurement class. It's at the foundation of that performance measurement class, because it all revolves around what is it? What is the change that you will happen to your beneficiaries as a result of being involved in the program? So these first two bullets, this is what develops the shared vision that you want to create between you and those that want to support you. Okay, so then it also helps an organization assess its performance, learn and adjust as needed. So I am an absolute advocate of measuring everything. And please don't misunderstand measurement by being quantitative only. Again, this is part of the performance measurement course. Measuring is for learning. That's why we measure. Measurement is not for punitive purposes. It's not to set standards that are impossible to achieve. It's to make progress. And so this fund development plan is structured in a way that you can make some clear goals and measurable goals, so that you can find out how it's going and adjust your plan as needed. It's also a fantastic tool, the only one I know of, to keep staff, even if you're the only staff, or if you have a team of 6 others on your development team, it keeps everyone focused on what is possible. So steps, we're going to talk about 7 steps. Sounds easy, takes discipline. All right, so we're going to, these are the 7 steps, and we're going to dig into each one of them momentarily. So step 1, understand the big picture. Be clear on your impact and theory of change. Know your financial position. That's kind of the research aspect of it. And then create a process, document the plan, gather your resources, and keep the plan vibrant. Okay, let's talk about a little bit more about understanding step 1. So what's the funding environment? Who's giving to what needs right now. I mean, probably you have it at the top of your mind if you think about what's going on. Rights to make choices for women about their bodies. That's front and center on either side of that argument. What else? Equity at the top of people's minds. That doesn't mean that whatever your organization is doing to make an impact is not going to be funded, but I'm just saying, understand what's going on in the funding environment. You've got to be aware of that constantly, no matter how you fit in. In fact, to know how you fit in, you need that. So what else? What sources of funds might be most suitable for your organization in the present environment? So key. It's the idea of not just putting asks out there for dollars to the wrong people. I mean, right? We're looking for alignment between, so relationship and shared purpose. That's what we're looking for. And then what resources are available to successfully pursue sustainable funding for your organization? And what am I talking about in resources? It might be just you. You are the only resource you have. There are some very small development teams, but it can also be a team of people. And I'm a proponent of that nothing in an organization is siloed or should be siloed. So fund development certainly should not be siloed, even if you're the only one that's executing on the plan. Include others. Also, resources relate to data. So what data do you have? So that's a good deal of the big picture. Now we're going to turn to sources of funds, since that was one of the things that we talked about. Where do you go? What's available? Now, I wanted to bring up the earned revenue portion of this just because many nonprofits have earned revenue. Theater performance groups, organizations that offer some kind of programming that people pay for partially or not. Merchandise. So you may or may not have earned revenue, but I want to bring this up. Contracted services are often contracts with the government or other kinds of services that an organization, maybe a private business, contracts with your nonprofit to execute. Sponsorships are often included, as in sponsorships from corporations are often included in earned revenue, because corporations are often engaging in this kind of giving as a form of marketing for them, for branding. And then there's earned revenue or earned income ventures that are distinct and separate from the nonprofit's core mission related activities. What's an example of this? An organization, a nonprofit that I know in my region has a coffee house that actually employs youth that are participating in the program to help build their skills. So it's unrelated really to the mission of the organization, which is, let's say, help kids get off the street, but they employ the youth and they earn a good deal of money from their coffee operation. So that's an example. And many nonprofits have set up earning ventures to be able to support them. So that's a source I want you to be aware of. But contributed revenue is what our fund development plan is primarily about. And what are the sources here? Annual gifts. That means that's usually the annual $100, $150. You hear that on NPR for their annual fund campaign drive every year. Major donors, usually that is differentiated. It's still individuals primarily, but a threshold is set. that might differs depending on the size of your organization. So for example, we might say gifts over $500 are considered major donor gifts. For organizations like, let's say, the symphony or a hospital might be 10,000. So major donors. Planned giving is a whole arena of area of giving that relates to people leaving in their wills something in perpetuity for the nonprofit. It's growing. This area is growing tremendously. Events, we know about those, and these are primarily the sources of contributed revenue through individuals. Foundations is another story, and that's what grant writing is about. Primarily to foundations that are set up for particular purposes with an interest in mind, and they might be willing to give to you. And there's a whole process about how to prepare a grant proposal. Also, you should know that the UW Tacoma has in their library an application that allows you to look up data about what foundations are giving to who. It's very powerful. It's a national database, and there's a librarian in the there at the on campus that is very well versed in this. So I encourage you all to use that as a resource, because that's what it's meant to be. There is some corporate giving. It's getting smaller and smaller all the time. That is actually through a corporate. It might be a foundation, but rather than sponsorships, meaning it's actually considered to be philanthropy. And then the government can sometimes be considered contributed revenue rather than contract revenue. So let's take a quiz. Sarah Lynn, will you launch that? We have a quiz. Don't worry about it. I mean, just take a guess, because we've just taught, and then you're going to see some of the answers after this. So go ahead and take your best guess at these questions, and I'm going to give you a moment to do that. And we'll stop the quiz and see what everybody does. Great. There's actually a method to my madness here for asking these questions, because it's going to introduce some other information that I think will be useful. So your results of the quiz will not be reported to anyone. Let's see. Maybe give you about 20 more seconds to respond. You don't have to ponder over these very much, because you're probably guessing, but you'll be surprised by the answers, I think. And Sarah Lynn, do I end the poll or do you?
Either way.
Okay. All right, so let's see what we got. And then share results. Here we go. Okay, so let's see what happened. So question 1, what is the largest contributed funding source? And we're going to see in a moment that, and many of you will be surprised, individuals represent the largest contributed source or funding source of contributed revenue. What's the median grant award in Washington? This will be disappointing for some of you because it will, you'll see that it's only $5,000, which is really, when we think about how much work we put into grant awards, it's not very much. Let's keep going. What percentage of philanthropic dollars from any source goes to Black-led organizations? Again, very disappointing. Many of you got that one right. Actually, it's less than 2%. 1.8 is the latest information that we have on that. And what are the most typical needs for funding? And it's all of the above. And our last question is the most flexible funding source is general operating. Okay. Good. So let's see if I can get rid of that poll now. So I wanted to give you this as a bit more detail behind that. And that is every year Giving USA produces a report. And this just came out 2 days ago. It takes them a while to gather the information, but this should give you a little bit of a feel. So here it is. Giving by individuals. This is nationally, and it's a well-known poll, and they go and seek out many organizations. It's voluntary, but many organizations contribute here. Nearly 70% of funding for nonprofit organizations comes from individuals. I bet you didn't know that. How much from, and you'll see in these slides, it also gives you the 324 billion, up a little bit from last year, which is interesting. Giving by foundation, foundations almost 20%. Giving by bequests, 9%, and giving by corporations. Now, why is this interesting? One is that it might help you think about that alignment. What source of funding is most suitable? Which is, we're interested in that, right? So I hope that's a little bit of a, interesting piece for you here. All right, now we're back on the 7 steps and we're on step 2. Intended impact and theory of change is the foundation of your fund development plan. This is a course unto itself. So in the performance measurement course, we talk about intended impact and theory of change. Understanding this will change the way you work in your organization. What you're doing is you're asking this: what is the problem my organization is seeking to solve? Who do I serve? How will I hold myself accountable? This is intended impact. It drills down into mission. Missions are aspirational, and people love to understand and hear the mission, but your intended impact has to be deeper than that. And so that's intended impact. It's the what of your organization, and the theory of change, what set of programs, activities, organizational capabilities, and relationships are required to achieve the outcomes for which you will hold yourself accountable. This is the how. This is the how. And so why does this matter? It matters because to effectively communicate to your donors, whoever they may be, foundations, corporations, individuals, when you can describe what change you are making in the world through your organization, how your beneficiaries will be changed as a result of your organization's work, now you're going to get some attention, especially if you have a solid theory of change, which says, this is how we're going to do it. This is how the steps we are taking to end food insecurity, for example. So step 2, it's the foundation of your fund development plan. Okay, step 3, know your financial position. Dig in, dive into it. Find out what's your total organizational budget size. This is so that you can put your fundraising work into context. how much are you raising relative to the total budget size, relative to your cost of programming, including it all, indirect allocated expenses such as staff time and rent, not just the direct cost of the program. You'll learn about this in the financial management course. What are the sources of earned and contributed revenue? Know these sources that you have right now, or if you don't have any, know that. So you can begin to say, what are the sources I'm going to seek that are most suitable to my work? All right. And then finally, what resources have been allocated to deploy a fund development plan? So in other words, do you have a budget for actually creating and executing a fund development plan? You need to know that. Whatever the answer is, you need to know what you're working with in order to dive into this venture. So then you create a process. Step 4, who should be involved? And I am a huge proponent, as I said, of inclusivity. And so that means that whether or not, if it's just primarily your responsibility for creating a fund development plan, fine, but include others. Everyone, the organization will benefit overall if everyone understands how whatever they're doing in the organization relates to this relationship building that we're doing the fund development plan to benefit from. So what resources? In this process, you need to be really clear. Do I have a database to collect information about my donors? What do I have? Who's going to do that? If I'm writing grants, who's going to be doing the other things? You need to get really clear and understand what capabilities exist and what you're missing. You assess. This is really important, especially the aspirational part. Assess current and aspirational sources of revenue. This is how you build. A student in our fund development course that just concluded started a new nonprofit, and she's made all of the investments from, as startup nonprofits do, from her family and friends. But now she's 2 years into it, and she's ready to start exploring the aspirational sources of revenue. And she's working on grant writing. Remember, we said the average grant is $5,000, and how much time is spent on that is surprising relative to the return. But you need to understand that. That's what this is about. It's exploring and understanding so that you can actually figure out what funds are potentially available from each of these sources. Outline the strategies and goals to achieve a balanced fund development plan. And balanced means, we're going to talk about what it is in a minute, but balanced says we're going to approach a variety of different sources and be able to have a strategy for the way we're going to approach them. You're going to identify tactics, the details that need to be accomplished for each thing, timelines, so that it's you actually create this fund development plan. You're creating a map, a roadmap, if you will, for how you're going to go about raising your funds. Okay. Then document the plan. Don't forget that part. You're going to use this plan. If it's a roadmap, you need to have it available to look at. Say, what am I working on this month with a good roadmap? You've got, this month I'm working on the following things, and this is how I'm going to measure my success. So I'm going to provide for you resources, or Sarah Lynn will provide for you resources after our time together today. And it includes 2 examples of fund development plans. So you can actually look at those and see I selected these 2 because they're both different formats. So you'll get to see how others go about. These are actual organizations, so you can see how others go about it. Share that plan that you've created with the staff and board of directors. Remember, inclusivity. Of course, the board of directors needs to be part of it because they're ultimately responsible for maintaining sufficient assets for the organization. So they should be involved from the beginning. And then get feedback, respond to questions, and gain agreement that this is doable. Then gather your resources. And so who's going to be responsible for participating in that plan in one way or another? Research existing and prospective resources. Who could help if you don't have anybody else? Identify approaches to deepen existing relationships and establish new ones. Okay, so one way to do this is to create really good stories about what your organization is doing. And you can do that in a respectful way of your participants. And you can also decide what stories are told and to whom that best reflect what the work is we're doing in our organization. So assign responsibilities, establish timelines, and keep the plan vibrant. So what that means is you have to measure results. And why do we measure? We measure to learn. That's why we measure. And so from your measurements, you learn something, and then you make adaptations so that you can be more effective. Modify your strategies and tactics as you go along. You needn't get to the end of your fundraising period and say, yeah, that didn't work. No use in doing that. So share the progress, celebrate when you achieve your goals, and celebrate your learning if you don't. So there you have it. Those are the seven steps. Sounds easy, right? I said it's not. But let's talk about what a balanced plan is. So it makes sense. It draws on diverse sources. So if all of your funding comes from, let's say, a government source, and you've hired staff, you've done all kinds of things based on this source, and it's not multi-year funding, and you don't get it the next year, you're in big trouble. Big trouble. Or let's say you have an angel investor that says, I'm going to give you this and you can use it as you please. That's like a dream. Nobody ever does that. But let's say that happened. And you were thinking, we're good to go. We've got a big old gift from a donor that loves what we do. And let's say you don't get it the next year. So draw on diverse sources. Get a balance. And then the balance might reflect that chart that we looked at that says 70% is individuals. You have to decide that, but that's a way to look at it. You include a balance plan, includes an approach for each source of funds, individuals, grants, etc., and differentiates existing and prospective sources. Why? Because your existing sources are already on board. New sources, need a different story told. A balance plan is clear on how each source best matches your stated aims. So remember, we're not spinning our wheels and just blanketing the world with asks. We are tailoring our asks to those that are already interested in giving to what we're doing. And then it's a continuous cycle. Effective fund development requires dedicated focus on an ongoing basis. Believe me, this is true. You don't just whip up an event one day and raise money. All right, we couldn't be complete here without talking about looking at this through an equity lens. So when we're talking about moving vast private resources around for public purposes, we're talking about power. No getting around it. It's a form or exercise of power. Many fundraising practices are rooted in toxic philosophies without an awareness of it. And I'm going to share an article with you that you can read about this a little bit more. But frankly, philanthropy is very much linked with the wealthy. Yes, I give my $250, here and there, but when we're talking about major philanthropy that changes social policy, we're talking about the wealthy, and we are aware of the wealth inequity in our country. And so what happens is that philanthropy or fund development is often related to making white wealthy donors comfortable. Something to think about. Also, the legal structure around philanthropy, meaning the deductibility, et cetera, those rules allow only a few voices to influence how the dollars are spent. So my question to you here is, how might this structure contribute to social inequity? And then my ask is, stop perpetuating. These are unconscious. This is what we call unconscious bias. Recognize the systemic causes of wealth inequity. Comprehend the ways that traditional fundraising efforts centers the comfort and happiness of predominantly white wealthy people. And then learn to and be willing to shift the status quo of fund development process by seeking out and cooperating with others in the field that are working toward equity. Okay, so one more is, here are the resources that, do I want more? Yes, I don't want to miss this one. This was a whirlwind tour, I told you. This is really like an hour or 45 minutes out of a 6-week program. So if you want more, look up what's happening in the nonprofit management program. I think the fall guide just came out today for classes. And in that course, we actually apply the learning, and participants in the course create a fund development plan for a nonprofit of their choice. Very powerful. Here are the resources you're going to get after today. What are intended impact and theory of change? Don't worry if it's a bit to take in, because it's a whole class, but I still want to get, just wet your whistle a little bit. Sample fundraising plans from City Dance Company and Kilkenny Children's Home, and then an article about the issue of racism in the profession of fundraising. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. That last was a bit of a whirlwind, but now I can see a few faces. Sarah Lynn, do you have something that you want to add right at this moment?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, and that we do have a few moments for questions. So if people have questions for Toni about the content or about fundraising in general, even about our program, I know we have a number of folks related to the program, such as Diane Lyons in the call today. It's not an info session for the program, but if it turns into an informal info session, that's okay too. So if you do have questions, please
ask.
Drop them in the chat. Toni, I think I mean, I'll kind of kick us off. I know that you've mentioned a number of things that are, changing or have changed given in the fundraising landscape, given not just the pandemic, but the last, 5 or 10 years. What do you think is going to be the most important thing for folks to keep in mind, or for folks to consider when putting together their development plans, maybe in the next 2 years?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that question, Sarah Lynn, because it's so important. And I'm reiterating what I already said, and that is philanthropists are smart, and they're they know what they want. This is becoming more and more the case. There used to be, I've been in the nonprofit sector for so long, but 20 years ago, I worked with a CEO or an executive director, and people said about him, oh my God, he can just get money out of people somehow. Like they said, when you come across him, you better check your wallet because somehow there's going to be money that went out of it and you don't know how. That's not the case anymore. So this idea of being absolutely clear on intended impact and theory of change, when you can tell a compelling story, either in writing or in person, about what difference your organization is making and how, now you're going to attract people. And this is I think the most important thing that we can get clear on is there's talking about your need as an organization is not useful. Everybody needs. Talk about what you're doing and how you're changing the landscape of our society. That's what people want to do. They want to get their hands on it. And then also, I think the second thing is to be prepared for others to want to get involved in different ways. So it is said in all the latest looks at the trends in philanthropy is that the younger generation wants to give money and get involved. So think about, when you're thinking about how people can support you, think about how they can get involved in your organization and create opportunities for them. Some people, and I want to tend to say the old-fashioned crowd, likes to write a check and be done. Younger generation, no. They want to write a check and they want to get involved.
Great, thank you. Again, we still have a few more minutes. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll just to get your feedback on this lunch and learn today. Again, these are new for us, and we want to make sure that they are delivering what y'all are looking for with these. I'm also going to take a moment here and drop a few links in the chat box. One is to, that's not correct. One is for those of you in the call who are not familiar with our nonprofit management program. I will drop that chat first, that link in the chat first. We are in the process still of revising and revamping our fundraising, our full fundraising certificate, because of all of these changes in the landscape and kind of what's moving forward. So keep an eye out for that. If you are interested, you can fill out our request for information form and we will get that to you when we have it. If you haven't signed up for other summer sampler programs, we are doing these throughout the summer. So once a week on Wednesdays, typically, for the rest of the summer. We have some other really great ones coming up. I'm going to, as Toni mentioned, we have registration open for fall. And then the last thing that I'm going to put in, partly because Toni spoke about it so beautifully today, is we are expanding our diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we should add belonging onto that title, but programming through the center. So we do have a few workshops that we've been offering regularly for the last couple of years online. We are hoping to expand the number of those over the next year and the number of topics. We are also working on a potential certificate program for DEI practitioners. So for people who either really want to, maybe you're not in a DEI role, but you want to make sure that's a really integral part of your organization or your strategy, or if you are in or looking to be something like an equity recruiter or a DEI trainer or an equity officer, something like that. That is something we're hoping to launch in winter term next year, but we are still kind of gathering our stakeholders and those kinds of things. So if you are interested in that, we have an advanced interest form on the website. To Yes, Diane, I think you would love it. We also, as part of the summer sampler, will be doing a kind of combination info session, listening session for folks who are interested in the DEI practitioner program, which is our tentative title for it. So you can sign up for that info session on the summer sampler page. To Jessica's question, yes, we will be sending out, I think, Toni, in the materials you sent us is the slides, right?
I did, yeah.
Yes.
I sent a handout.
Yes. So there are a few articles that Toni mentioned or resources that we will be sending out, as well as the slides, the handout from today. And then if you would like to access the recording of this when it's available, we will send out an email letting you know when it's available. And then you can fill out a little form and get access to that. So any other questions for Toni, as we are right here at 1 o'clock?
Okay, we'll sign up for some of our courses. I'd love to see you again and get into a little bit more in depth of these and other topics. So yeah, love to see you in the courses.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.